Hi, today we're really excited to have Gary Curtis with us from cyclemechanic.co.uk. So Gary, tell us a little bit about yourself and what we're going to be covering today.
My name is Gary Curtis, I'm a cycle mechanic. I've been a mechanic for 20 years. The last 2 of those years I've been working for myself as a mobile mechanic. I travel around fixing people's bikes from their properties.
So tell us a little bit about the M-Check.
Okay, so the M-Check is a check that can be done on a regular basis. I would recommend a week to a 2 week, and it's to make sure that it's functioning properly and it's safe to ride, and it's an easy thing to go through. It takes 10 minutes of your time, and it can save a lot more time.
Brilliant. Okay, let's take a look.
It's called an M-Check because we check the bike in an M shape. So we run from the back wheel, we run up to the seat and the seat post, we come down to the chain set, we then run from the chain set up to the front of the bike. So what we're going to do, we're going to start from the rear of the bike. So starting from the rear wheel, tyres are very important. We want to check the pressures of the tyres and also the condition. So tyre pressure is very important. If the pressures are too low, it can be hard work. Too hard and you kind of get rattled. You don't really need them to be super high. We also want to check the condition of the tyre, the sidewall, to see if there's any perishing or any cracking, and then the actual tyre itself to see if there's any sharp objects or splits in the tyre. Any splits in the tyre means it's much easier to get into a situation where you get a puncture. So first things first, that's the tyre. So we check the rear wheel, we make sure that's running properly. We can also spin the rear wheel to make sure that it's running true and not fouling the rear brake. So that's really nice, that's running nicely. Any rubbing on that brake obviously will slow your progress, and also it'll wear the brake pads down. So that's running nicely. We then need to look at the rear mechanism or derailleur. Again, we want to make sure that's nice and tight, that these bolts here, these Allen keys are nice and tight, and also the 9mm spanner here to make sure that cable's nice and tight. We come onto the cable, make sure there's no fraying on that cable. If there is fraying on that cable, it means it could be problematic if you want to make any adjustments. So this one's nicely done. It's got a little ferrule on the end which will keep it nice and tidy. Okay. We then check the rear freewheel or cassette and make sure that's nice and tight, there's no play in there, and that's okay. The next thing we come along from is the drivetrain, the chain. Very important. And we can run that backwards. We can have a look at that as we run it backwards and make sure that there's no stiff links. We also make sure that there's no cracks or in the side of that chain to make sure that's running nicely. That's nice and smooth, it's not fouling at all, so that's great. Okay. So from the rear wheel, the rear derailleur and the chain, we now run up the bike. So we run up the chains, the seat stay. We then run up to the rear caliper, the rear brake of the bike. We want to make sure this is operating. Obviously brakes are very, very important. So we can just put that rear brake on, make sure that's working nicely, and it's slowing the bike up. Okay, that's great. So we've now checked the rear brake, we've checked that that's tight. There's a bolt here, that's nice and tight, there's no movement in there. From there, we work up to the seat post clamp, the seat post and the saddle itself. What we can do here, we can just give that a little check. We can see if that moves. That's nice and tight, that's not moving. Again, we've got a clamp, we've got a 5mm Allen key that will keep that in place. We then come up to the saddle and we can move that up and down, make sure there's no movement there. A 6mm Allen key here, that can be checked nice and easy. So that's fine. We then run down the seat post or the seat tube to the chain set and the front mechanism. So again, we want to check here that it's all tight and working nicely and spinning. So we can run that chain set round, that's running nice and smoothly. We can then get hold of the crank arms, move them back and forwards to see if there's any side-to-side play here. And that's really working nicely. There's no movement in what we call the bottom bracket. This is a sealed unit that sits inside the bike that the chain set spins on. Again, there's no movement in there. It's spinning really nicely. We then come down to the pedals. We can check the pedals are tight, move them back and forwards so that there's no play in either the bearings or the actual fixing, the thread that fixes to the chain set. So that's fine. We then come up to the front mechanism. Again, we can get that in our hand, we can move that side to side, make sure that there's no movement. This front derailleur is held with a 9mm spanner, both on the clamp and on the cable clamp, and both of those are nice and tight. We can actually go up and check the function of that, make sure that that's working. There we go, some nice smooth movement, that's working nicely. And it's nice and smooth, that means the cable's in good condition. Okay, so from the chain set and the front derailleur, we're going to work our way up what we called the down tube of the bike, the main part of the frame. We'll work our way up to the front of the bike and the head tube of the frame. This section from here to here is the head tube. So from here we go up to the handlebar stem. This is a head stem on this bike. It's clamped at the back here with two 5mm Allen keys. Also there's a 5mm Allen key at the top here. All three of these are very important. They make sure that the steering is working safely, and it clamps the whole of this front end together. So these three bolts here, very important. And these can be checked again with a 5mm Allen key. One this side, one the other side, and then the top cap here. We move along the stem to the front here, and this is the clamp that holds the handlebars into the stem. And again, we have four 5mm Allen keys. Again, very important here. If this is loose and you brake quickly, the handlebars can move in your hands. We want to make sure that's nice and tight. Okay. We can do that. We can by holding the front wheel and just moving the wheel and the handlebars against each other to see if there's any movement here. We can also get hold of the handlebars and try and move them up and down. So again, no movement here, that's nicely put together. So from there we move down the handlebars. So this is a racing bike with drop handlebars, and we move to the brake levers here. Again, as we said with the rear brake, it's very important that this front brake works properly. So we can pull on this brake here, the lever, just to make sure that brake's working properly, that there's no movement there. And then again, we get hold of that front caliper, we can move that side to side, make sure that's nice and tight. Okay. Also on this bike we have the gears up here. There's lots of different systems. Some of the newer systems have gears that are incorporated into the brake. These are slightly older version that clamp separately. Again, we can just get hold of that clamp, make sure that that's working nicely, nice and stiff, that there's no movement there. Okay, so we're happy with that. We've already tried the rear brake at the back of the bike. We can now just get hold of that lever, move it side to side to make sure there's no movement there, and again with the other side. We're happy with that. Okay, we now move down the front of the bike to the front fork. So the front fork is held again by these, as we went before, by these three bolts. We go down to this front wheel. On this front wheel we have a quick release. It's a really easy way to get that wheel out of the bike without having any tools. But we need to make sure that that's nice and safe. So we can get hold of that quick release in our hand and make sure that that's nice and tight. We're happy with how that is, and that's functioning properly. We can now spin that front wheel up to make sure that that's running nicely, and it is. Operate the brake, come off the brake, and that's working. So last thing we want to look at is where we started on the back of the bike, and it's the front tyre. So we go through the same process with this front tyre. Make sure the sidewall is in good condition, there's no cracking here, and then we need to check the tread of the tyre, make sure that there's no small obstacles, small particles sitting on this tyre, that there's nothing that's going to puncture that. Also, that there's no cuts or slits in the tyre, and that's nice and clean. We're happy with that. So that's your M check. It's a check that can be done once or twice a month, and it will save a lot of trouble in the long run and keep you cycling.
Thanks Gary, that was really helpful.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
And just to mention, the 5 and 6mm hexes, as well as a series of wrenches that were included in the video, are all included in the Rehab Plus multi-tool. You can reach Gary at cycle-mechanic.co.uk. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit subscribe for more how-tos and maintenance tips.